Well, at least the title's appropriate.
I really regret calling dibs on this one.
So, God. Okay, so we're talking about Devil All the Time.
Devil All the Time. The Midwestern movie starring a bunch of British people. I had hopes for this because of the cast.
Me too. Yeah, I was like, "Ooh, Tom Holland and like Robert Pattinson. Cool, I'm down. That looks cool." I'm like, love both of them. They're both great actors.
I actually looked up this director. This director has actually, I've seen a couple of this director's other movies. He directed Simon Killer, which kind of made some waves back when it came out, like in 2012 or so. I watched it. I did not understand what all the hype was about. It was like a 4 out of 10 for me. And then there was the movie Christine about a newscaster who killed herself live on air. And it's like an actual thing that happened. And this movie was like chronicle of her life. Oh, you're gone. You're just your avatar.
Yeah, no, I'm not fixing it. There we go.
All right. And I was kind of underwhelmed by that movie too. And it explained a lot about how this movie fits in with my feelings of that, except I feel like this movie was him being way more ambitious and falling even shorter because of it.
It feels like definitely biting off more than you can chew. Knowing what to do with it.
Let's make clear what we were talking about earlier first, though. Let's point out the good things about this, because all of the acting in this is fucking great.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All of the actors do a really good job with their characters. They really embody their characters. The Robert Pattinson is, of course, fucking great in his role. Tom Holland's performance is kind of subtle and understated. It's really good to see him pull that out. There were other actors in the movie, and they were also
bad
good
performance in it.
Yeah, there's not a single actually bad performance, but
meandering and all over the place. And
okay, so yeah, the issue with the movie is that it's based on a book that follows a lot of different characters.
Yeah, and I think you made a very good point. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Through decades, the storyline takes place over the course of decades, and it follows a bunch of different characters. And the author of the book is actually the narrator of the movie. And that's when I kind of had a sneaking suspicion. I didn't know it was based on a book when I started watching the movie, and I got so bored that I looked it up. So it turns out the author is the writer of the book, and the narrator is the author of the book. And it made sense, because when the author is narrating what's going through the characters' heads, you can tell that he has a connection with the material. You can tell he cares about those characters and understands the depth that they could have. But he's not credited as a writer outside of writing the original novel, so he wasn't involved in the adaptation.
Yeah.
So the impression that I got of this movie was that it was some people who really liked the book, who wanted to make it into a movie, but didn't want to leave any of these characters that they loved out of the movie. So they basically included like a couple of bare bones scenes for each character, and you don't really get time to get to know these characters or get invested in them. Like it does this thing where you start to, like, I don't know. I want to get into it more when we get into spoiler territory, just to explain it properly. But I think the summary is basically most of the characters in the movie, I feel like, could have used more elaboration, and this would have been much, much better as like an HBO miniseries that was 6 to 10 episodes.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because I thought that would have been a much better way to go about it. You've had much time to flesh things out. I think also, like, kind of bouncing off what you were saying, I do agree. It does seem like someone who really liked the book and wanted, like, try to do it justice. But the problem, I think, one of the major problems I feel like I ran into is that it does so at the expense of actually adapting it to a different medium.
Yeah.
In that, like, this isn't giving any spoilers away, but there's a heavy use of narration from beginning to end of the film. And this is a personal issue I've always had, like, movies like this. So it's like, okay, you're telling, not showing. A lot of stuff you're
Yeah.
explaining
Show don't tell.
through visual language.
Yeah.
And you're not doing that. You're literally explaining the characters' motivations, stuff like that to me, and what their overall narrative purpose is, and what it's supposed to mean in relation to like their religious beliefs in God. And it's like, you could just fucking show that to me, and I'd be much more engaged. Trust the audience is smart enough to figure it out. You can get away with that in a book, but you can't do that in a movie.
The thing I like, I disagree with that slightly. I mean, I agree with the show don't tell, but the difficulty of adapting something like this into a movie is clearly the characters in the book have a lot of their most complex thoughts going on internally. Like, but when he is narrating those moments of what is going on inside the characters, it is beautiful and poetic, and really, like, there's some really nice stuff in there. And you can tell that the source material was really nuanced and had a texture and depth to it that the movie is completely lacking. It would have done much better. And when you see the way that the stories evolve and intertwine with each other, you kind of understand why all the different stories are required to make sense of the big picture. But you could have done something to cut a couple of things out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I could have done without the entire first 45 minutes of the movie.
And we were counting.
Yeah.
It felt like
we'll get into why when we get into spoilers, but
like this massive prologue. There's like, Jesus Christ, like, we know this is not like the actual crux of the story, so why are you spending so much time on it?
Tom Holland is the closest we get to a main character in the movie, and he doesn't pop up as Tom Holland in his modern form until like
an hour into the movie.
5 minutes into the movie. It's absurd.
Yeah.
And while the previous 45 minutes does have certain things that are related to his character, I would say you could have easily covered it in 15 minutes max. There was no need for all of that. The connections to the other plot lines could have been revealed as flashbacks or revelations later, like a normal movie would do. But it wastes a lot of time that it could have used making us more connected to the characters. And you can tell that these actors are really invested in their characters and doing a good job of acting, but
that's also
pacing is a slog.
Yeah, but that's also kind of what I mean by like not knowing how to adapt from novel to film. It's like you can probably tell there's a lot more of this in the book that they didn't want to cut any of it. So what you have is this unnecessarily long prologue. Now you can get away with that in a novel. Novels are meant to take a long time, and they're meant to like explain everything in great detail. That's the purpose of them. But film has to be more cohesive. Has to be tighter. It has to be like more. What's what I'm looking for? Competent.
There's an art to adapting a book, and that's kind of ironic because while I have not read the book for either of these movies, the movie we're reviewing after this was also adapted from a book.
Yeah,
but it was done so differently and in a way that is actually pretty decent, I guess, in a way.
At least in the second we will talk about, which we'll
get into it.
See what he's trying to do in that movie.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that when we get there.
Yeah, that's when we get to I'm thinking of ending things.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, in regards to this movie, and like it's hard to go into details without going into spoilers. But like the parts I like about this movie, I have to like wait over an hour and a half to get to, and by then you have no investment in anything going on. Nothing is grabbing or engaging. It jumps all over the place, but doesn't carry the strength in the narrative to actually invest you in anything happening. It's just like, okay, now we're on these people for a while now. Okay, now we're on these people for a while. It's just like, dear God, something interesting happened, please.
There are a couple moments that I found darkly humorous, partially because I didn't give a fuck about the characters, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, like we'll talk about that in spoilers and probably a little bit.
I laughed my ass off at 3 points of the movie that I most definitely was not supposed to laugh my ass off at. So,
honestly, the only scene I would say is genuinely pretty good in this movie that I would think stands well on its own
The
is
one
the
in the church later.
is like the only scene where Tom Holland and Robert Pattinson actually act against each other,
Yeah,
and like easily the best scene in the film.
fantastic. It's
And
fantastic.
it's so good. It's like I had to wait like 2 fucking hours to get here.
Yeah, and it's a damned shame that this director didn't know how to build the movie around these kinds of moments better.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it makes you really want to see a movie with those two actors in again because they worked
yeah,
really well off
absolutely,
each other.
absolutely.
Yeah,
They're both treasures, and I look forward to seeing more from them all the time. But yeah, this movie is a goddamn waste. It's just a bad adaptation from what was clearly much better material. It has great performances, but Jesus fuck, is it boring? It is 2 hours and 20 minutes of really boring shit, and it is not worth anybody's time. There's so many other movies that we could have been watching, and I
Yep.
regret this. I
Yep.
I legitimately regret dedicating my evening to this movie.
Yeah, I would have rather watched Antebellum, and I haven't heard anyone like that movie yet.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard very bad reviews of Antebellum, but I'm at least interested to see what happens in it.
Yeah,
This was just boring.
it was a waste of time. And I feel bad because again, it's like kind of going to the other movie we'll talk about later tonight too. It's like, God damn it, I want to like this movie.
I
Like,
really wanted to. I
like
really
this
wanted
looks like a movie I would like, and to feel like it had such great potential wasted because it didn't know how to respect the different medium styles is just so frustrating to watch.
Yeah. So
Spoilers
yeah,
from here on
let's
out. Yeah.
let's the spoiler warning. We're just gonna break into spoilers because fuck it. So I let's do you want to just do a whole rundown of the movie real quick? Because believe it or not, I think I can summarize it pretty quickly
Go
compared
for
to
it.
all right. You've got Pennywise, the trauma PTSD veteran who comes back from the war, meets a waitress in a diner, and it's the same diner where another dude meets another waitress, and they end up hooking up and becoming serial killers together. But your main character, the soldier, at this point, gets together with his waitress girlfriend. He saw a Marine crucified in the war, so now he's got a really weird relationship with crosses. But he goes to church and all. He's very devout. When he goes to church one day, he actually ends up seeing this crazy roaming preacher who is also a fucking, well, he ends up being a murderer too. And that preacher ends up hooking up with a lady that the soldier guy was initially supposed to hook up with. So they all go on their separate paths. Let's see. Preacher dude goes off with other lady, has a kid, a daughter, and then murders his wife with the genuine belief that God will allow him to bring her back to life, and he can't. And he ends up exiling himself and goes off and ends up getting killed by the serial killer couple that we met earlier. The soldier dude shows his son how to beat up people, and then his wife gets cancer, and he prays really hard for her to come back to life at his prayer log with the cross. That doesn't work, so he murders his son's dog and crucifies it and traumatizes his son pretty badly. And then one day his son comes out and finds his dad has slit his own throat over the prayer log, and his
mother dies.
After his mom dies, his dad slits his throat over the prayer log, and a cop comes and picks him up and comes back and sees like, what the fuck is this? And the kid goes, it's a prayer log. Doesn't work too good though. And I fucking died. I was laughing. It's my first good moment half an hour into the movie. It's the first half hour of the movie. Now, meanwhile, the daughter from the crazy preacher dude is also an orphan. They're being raised together as stepbrother and stepsister by grandparents. Cool. So time goes on. He's very protective of her. She goes to church and ends up trusting a preacher that's kind of a dick, Robert Pattinson, who is a delight in this movie in the sense that he's a good performance. He's a scumbag, though. And that dude ends up having sex with her and getting her pregnant and then telling her she needs to get rid of it and telling her about how much of a shame it's going to be. So she goes and she's going to hang herself. And then she realizes she doesn't want to, but she's stupid and accidentally knocks over the bucket and hangs herself and dies. and Tom Holland finds her, and it's really sad. And let's see. In the meantime, the serial killer couple continues killing people, and the cop that found Tom Holland as a child is running for mayor or sheriff or some shit, and he's worried about his campaign because his sister is, surprise, surprise, the serial killer of the couple and also a prostitute. So Tom Holland goes and basically has this really great scene where he is the scene that we really liked, where he is talking to the preacher and basically telling him a story that is coming across as a confession, but then the preacher figures out what's going on and he kills the preacher, and that's great. And then he goes off to hitchhike or whatever, and it turns out that he accidentally caught a ride with the serial killer couple, and he catches on that they're up to no good because he's the gun, and he ends up shooting them before they can shoot him. And he goes back to the prayer log, and the cop is all pissed off about his sister and is hunting him down because he also killed the preacher, and they know because it was a 9mm. And Tom Holland basically has a showdown at the prayer log and kills the sheriff, and then hitchhikes a ride with a hippie and goes off and apparently has like a better life somewhere. And that's the movie. That's the whole movie. And it takes so long. It takes so long. We forgot about Bobo and
I was going to bring it up, but they mattered so little in the overall scheme of
things. The sheriff is basically in cahoots with a couple of like mob guys who are basically trying to strong arm him into minding his own business and letting his sister do what she wants. So he ends up murdering them too. It's a mess. It's a mess of a movie, and you can tell that all of the characters could have been good, but they suck because they don't get enough to work with. They're each given like the soldier dude, the traumatized soldier dude. This dude gets half an hour where you think he's going to be the main character, and then he fucking dies, and it bears almost no significance.
Yep.
Like, and even if it has significance on Tom Holland's character, which it does, we didn't need like 20 of that 30 minutes showing how he met his wife and everything. Like it's this really contrived thing where they're trying to link the stories together.
Yeah, and it's like it's not character driven. It just feels like it's just playing the plot beats until it gets to the next significant plot point. There's nothing driving it beyond that. It's like, oh, I mean you right now because this has to happen for the plot, and that's
yes. And it could have been good. It could have had like all of these things tying together. It wouldn't have seemed as weird and contrived if all the plot threads had more time to develop. But for a movie that's over 2 hours long, it does surprisingly little with it.
Yeah. Or alternatively, it's like it's less like these things are happening because the character's choosing to do them versus these things need to happen so the movie can happen, which is what I felt like.
I was so uninvested in this film that when the sister literally kicks the bucket and hangs herself by accident, she meant to, but she changed her mind, and then she hangs herself by accident. My immediate reaction was to laugh and say, fucking idiot.
Yeah, I remember.
I did not care. It's just, there's so much unpleasantness and ugliness in this movie with no purpose. And I'm a person who loves some sadistic ass movies. Yeah, there's no fun in this.
Like, First Reform.
There's no fun in this, and there's no, like, there doesn't seem to be a point.
There's no depth to
it when it happens. Yeah, it's just there.
I was reading over some like critics while it was sent a Zoom call, and one I liked the best said like, "It's paper fish swimming in a cardboard barrel." That's what this movie is. It's like it's shallow. It has the pretense of being deep while saying not a whole lot. And the things it does say doesn't really grab your attention because you're not invested in anyone that's actually involved in it. Because everyone is paper thin. You don't get to know anybody doing anything. It's just they exist in this world, therefore you're supposed to care about them on that virtue alone.
Yes. I remember I mentioned this in the first half hour of the movie. I'm like, I don't feel like we haven't seen these characters interact at all. Like there are a couple of scenes in the movie where you see characters actually bonding. And that's essentially between Tom Holland and the sister character. Mm-hmm. And like the way that they interact and develop a relationship, it's like a taste of what could have been. Yeah. But there's so little to actually get you invested in these characters that as stuff develops, you just don't give a shit. And it's a waste because you can tell it could have been good.
and the characters that are presented during that time aren't given enough interest or enough like anything unique about them to worthy of investing your time into. Like an example of something I did this right, I think on top of my head, like Pulp Fiction, where you did have the same thing. We had limited time with these characters, but they were unique and they had personality and had like
interesting
dialogue. You would like, ooh, okay, I haven't heard this kind of thing before. This is interesting to watch. I want to see more of this, and like very quickly it catches your attention.
Yeah.
But like this one doesn't have
about the relationships between them.
Yeah, like it emphasizes that, knows where to focus it, and knows like it immediately establishes connection, personality, intrigue, motivation, plot, and then it makes you want to come back to them later when they do come back to like fit the larger whole. This case is like, oh great, we got another monotone character that kind of does the whisper talk indie movie bullshit and has no personality, no connection, no motivation. They just exist in this world and that's it. So it's like, it's not even like they need more time to expand. They just need to do something interesting with the time they have, and they just don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both problems, honestly.
True.
It was badly adapted, and also there was a lot going on that they could have used extra time to adapt it. I feel like it deserved a miniseries. The people who adapted this were not nearly as good at writing as the original author seems to have been, and it's a damn shame. I feel like a 4 out of 10 for this movie. Maybe.
Right, I'm there with you, honestly. Yeah.
So I don't think there's much more to say about it.
Neither can I. Like I said, we liked exactly one scene in the whole fucking movie. It's 2.5 hours long. So yeah. I've go watch anything else right now.
No, not anything else. We'll get to another thing you probably shouldn't watch, but maybe might want to. I don't know.
Like I could at least the second one, I could understand why some people would actually like it. Like I could see the appeal.
Of what, the other one?
The other one, yeah.
Yeah. It's the other movie we were talking about, by the way, is I'm Thinking of Ending Things. We're gonna do that after this.
Which is a coffin movie. So like because I was thinking about it last night because I was up late watching it yesterday, and I was like, okay, I can see. We'll talk about it in a bit, but I can see where they're going with it. I can see why some people would like this. It's just not working for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's just get to that. I'm done with this.
All right. So,
fuck this movie. Don't watch it. It sucks.
All right. We're gonna talk about it in about 5 seconds. Well, not 5. Whatever. I'll take
cut the call and rejoin the call so that we have the full time.
Yeah. All right. Bye, guys.